Hi, my name's Steve, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about corn. So, corn is actually a pretty amazing plant. We produce over 403 million tons of corn in the United States every single year. It's the most important food crop in the world, coming only behind wheat and rice. We use it in a lot of different things. So what a lot of people don't realize is that corn is actually a type of grass. When you eat a cob of corn, you're actually eating the fruits of a type of grass. You're probably thinking to yourself that, well, that doesn't look very much like grass, but it is. So the ancestor of corn was called teosinte, and it actually looked something like this. So it looks very, very different. Um, but humans bred that grass, teosinte, to be something like corn about 7,000 years ago in central Mexico. From there, it actually spread. Much of its popularity was due to a process called nixtamalization. It's uh, Even more amazing than my ability to pronounce that is the actual chemical process that happens. By taking that corn and cooking it with an alkaline substance like wood ash or a little bit of crushed up limestone, the Native Americans were actually able to take the amount of protein that's in those kernels and actually make it release niacin, which is very important for humans as an essential amino acid. We can't make it ourselves, so we have to have it in our diet. Um, so when Europeans first arrived in North America, there was already corn here. The Native Americans had corn that looked something like this. It actually was used to make things like meal or flour and then processed into food like mush or cornmeal. Beyond just the actual kernel, they actually used the leaves from the husk to make to dry out and weave together to make things like baskets and mats. Um, so it was a pretty important staple for those people. Even the pollen was gathered and used during different ceremonies. So for most tribes, what they actually had was a type of flint corn. Flint corn is very different than what you would expect when you think of corn that you would eat off of the cob. Flint corn is actually very hard once it's dried out. The pericarp or skin or hull, whatever you want to call it, is hard like a rock. That's where it gets its name, flint corn. So it had to be ground down to be able to be used. Another type of corn that you are more familiar with is something called sweet corn. So that's what you would have if you had a piece of corn that you were eating off the cob or canned corn or frozen corn kernels. It's a different type of corn than flint corn. And I'm going to let you on a little bit of a secret about corn. Next time you're at the family barbecue, you can break apart your corn cob and count the number of kernel rows. So you can see that all of the kernels on this cob come in rows. See that? And actually, what's really cool is that the number of rows per cob is always an even number. It's very, very rare you have an odd number. And it really doesn't matter where in the world it's grown or how it's grown. It's always an even number. And more often than not, the vast majority of corn cobs out there actually have 16 rows. So if you were to look down your corn cob after breaking it, you would count 16 different rows of corn kernels. Now, sometimes there's 14, sometimes there's 18, but more often than not, there are 16 rows of kernels on an ear of corn. If you can't use that to impress your friends and family at your next summer barbecue, I don't know what else will. The third type of corn I'll talk about is called dent corn. So in dent corn, each kernel has a tiny little indent on the top of the kernel. That's also something that we call filled corn. So if you're driving down the highway in Utah, you're more than likely going to see dent corn. It's not one that you would go and pick an ear off of the plant and eat because it's not going to taste very good. What we use it for is processing. So when we process that down, we get all sorts of different corn products, things like corn flour or even corn gluten. Corn syrup is actually made from dent corn, and that's used in pretty much all of our processed foods. If you go and look at any processed food package, you'll probably see some amount of corn product in there. We can even use it for other sorts of corn products by further processing it. So believe it or not, we can actually make corn into things like certain types of biodegradable plastic. There's even corn in some batteries. That's pretty amazing. Another use of corn is to make ethanol. So when you go and fill up the car at the gas station, a lot of time there's ethanol in that gasoline, and it makes your car go down the highway. It's pretty amazing. The third type of...
Now, wait, hold up. I'm going to let you finish, Steve, but you forgot a very important use of dent corn, and that's livestock feed. Dent corn is commonly fed to dairy and beef cows, sheep, goats, pigs, chickens, turkeys, or even household pets. Now, as you were.
The last sort of corn I'm going to talk about is actually a type of flint corn, and it's one you guys are probably familiar with. Popcorn. Popcorn is one of my favorite types of corn, and I like it so much because it has some really interesting science behind it. Have you ever thought to yourself, what makes a piece of popcorn pop? I mean, you take the little package and you put it in the microwave and you hit the popcorn button. Magic happens and you have popcorn. The fact that popcorn has its own button on my microwave here, I think is proof to show how great of a snack that is. But what happens is you're heating that up is the microwaves, which are part of the electromagnetic spectrum, are exciting water molecules inside that corn kernel. Now, inside each corn kernel, there's proteins and starches and sugars that are being cooked. And those water molecules, as it's heating up, start bouncing around faster and faster and faster until finally the outside of that kernel can't take any more pressure and it explodes. So we're going to look at that firsthand and see what that looks like. So here I have a bottle of ethanol, which is alcohol derived from corn. I'm going to apply some exciting energy to produce a heat source. That's right, I'm going to pop my popcorn with ethanol made by popcorn. That's pretty exciting. So now that I've donned my appropriate protective gear, I'm going to try to show you how this happens. So we have our popcorn kernels here, and we're going to apply heat. So that heat is going to excite those water molecules, all those little water molecules inside those corn kernels, until eventually that vapor pressure increases so much that it's going to explode. Those water molecules are going to bounce around more and more until eventually the pericarp or the skin of that corn kernel can't take any more energy and it's going to explode. Come on, popcorn. All right, we're getting there. Whoa, there we go. Come on, let's get a few more. Yeah, there we go. Come on, a few more for the 4-Hers. There we go. Okay, increasing that heat energy until finally it's just going to explode. Very cool, right? Whoa, that was a good one. Woo! Ho! Hey, it worked.
The next thing I wanted to show you is how this works in slow motion. So remember, all of this has to do with water molecules. So here we have a popcorn kernel and heat is being applied. Eventually, those water molecules are being excited so much and building up that vapor pressure that the outside of the kernel just explodes. And all of the starches and proteins and sugars inside that kernel are being cooked almost instantly with explosive force. Isn't that awesome? Okay, we're going to see one more here. Okay, here we go.
Well, I hope you guys learned something a little bit about corn and its role in agriculture in our everyday lives. I also hope that you learned a little bit about how the science of popcorn actually works. Thanks for tuning in and watching, and I hope you all have a great day.